recently and throughout her life with her father. Yasuyo's father died in December 19th, 2021, just a few months ago.
Around this time last year, I was infected with COVID-19. I had no underlying pre-existing illness. Luckily, I didn't need any special treatment. I got better on my own, at home, with no medicine. But it took time to recover. After waking from a long sleep, the first place I visited was Morningside Park. I saw the Statue of Liberty laying down. It was reminiscent of the Buddha's Nirvana pose. I met Zaq Landsberg, who created this sculpture, titled Reclining Liberty. He was setting things up. Its appearance seemed to reflect the current situation in New York and the things going on in my mind. A year later, I look back on the days I spent at Reclining Liberty and trace what happened and what I learned from it. The Fukushima nuclear disaster began on March 11, 2011. The COVID-19 pandemic also began on March 11th. Disasters threaten our health and deprive us of our freedoms. 27 years ago, I moved from Japan to New York, alone, in search of freedom. I experienced the September 11th attack in New York City and witnessed the loss of peaceful daily life. It was an event that made me realize that I was living in a very fragile reality. I returned to Japan once a year after my father was diagnosed with dementia. However, the COVID-19 pandemic made visiting Japan difficult. I was talking with my parents on video calls, but my father's hallucinations were getting worse. My mother was seriously fatigued from her round-the-clock care for him. During the lockdown, I began folding paper cranes in consideration of people suffering from illness, including my parents. Origami, which is known to all Japanese people, has become a communication tool for people, including parents and children. It has long been taught through one-on-one hands-on demonstrations. Origami cranes have become a worldwide peace symbol after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. When something difficult happens that I can't control, my hands move instinctually and naturally to fold paper cranes. During the pandemic, I started walking in Morningside Park. Nature has healed me and taught me many things. The colder the winter, the more vital the spring, and the more dramatic the return of the new buds. I lay down on the green-covered land and felt connected to my parents and friends who are beyond the sky. I saw dead leaves, dead squirrels, dead birds, and dead rats. I noticed that they became part of the soil. While strolling through the park, I connected with nature. I thought about my life. By overlaying the cycles of life over the changing landscape of the four seasons. And in nature, where life and death intersect, the Statue of Liberty lays with her eyes closed. Immediately after Reclining Liberty began living in Morningside Park, my father was hospitalized. His condition deteriorated rapidly, partly because of COVID-19 rules, which rarely allowed family visits. Living in another country, I could only pray for the end of COVID-19 and the recovery of my father's health. I dyed Japanese paper, folded origami paper flowers, and collected them to make a medicine ball. In Japanese, It's called a kusudama. My desire to share the experience of healing via origami came true. I held medicine ball workshops last summer. At these workshops, I met people who were as sick as my father, who were going to be operated on, and many who were worried about the COVID-19 pandemic. These participants and I were healed by connecting over our common wishes for health, peace, and freedom. After 7 months of fighting many illnesses, my father died on December 19, 2021. My last conversation with my father was on the morning he was hospitalized, the last day he spent at home. My father looked strong, was calm, and was full of words of love that showed his care for his family. He didn't seem to have dementia. I'll never forget the overwhelming feelings I had as my father spoke his last words to me. Remember me. During the 12 years my father suffered from dementia, my family learned a lot from him. I had conflicts with my father because we had different values and ideas for our lives. I moved to New York City to live freely in my own way. I survived in New York without relying on my parents. I showed my father I was free and responsible. In 2010, I held my first solo expedition in Japan entitled Transformation, Question to Myself. My relationship with my father improved gradually when my father came to see my artworks. I returned to Japan every year until 2019. The days I spent with my father helped us heal each other and smooth out our differences. Parents tend to expect children to do what parents think is good. Due to differences between generations and individual values, one person's happiness may not be another person's happiness. Parents and children are unique persons with different constitutions and personalities. During my relationship with my father, we noticed our love was greater than our differences. In these unstable and unchanging times, through mutual understanding with my father, I have been empowered to restore peace and balance in my heart and to believe in a sustainable future. My father, who continues to inspire me, was a mentor throughout my entire life. Now, I'm at a turning point. I had a lot of experiences since I was born, as a child of my mother and father. These experiences became points, and I have aimed to connect the points to make lines, connect the lines to make a surface, and connect the surfaces to make a solid. This shape is beginning to appear. I can think of a kusudama, made in collaboration with workshop participants. Each participant made unique origami flowers out of Japanese paper, dyed in various colors and patterns. The origami flowers are tied together in the center, accepting each other's differences, and they bloom into big flowers. It's a kusudama sphere. It may represent the globe of our earth. Looking at Reclining Liberty, who falls asleep, surrounded by Morningside Park's nature, I think of my father, who died with tears and a smile, freed from the fear of death and his attachments to this world. My father and I were freed from long-standing conflicts and found love for each other. I remember the message, freedom, not controlled by anything, that I wrote for my junior high school graduation ceremony. I arrived in New York in search of freedom. I realized I was under the control of my own thoughts. It was myself who was hindering my freedom. Wake up.